over a period of time. Disappointed in the loss. Was pleased with our mentality. As I mentioned before, I was very disappointed and frustrated with our the way we came out against Tulane, and excited about this next opportunity. Kind of working back a little bit with Western Kentucky. I think that we played hard. We were emotionally into the game. I think that obviously offensively we're in a state of a little bit of transition, although I think that Braley is continuing to get better, and in that process that allows for maybe not as much transition as kind of what we've seen. I think that defensively we've got to get our confidence level back a little bit. I think Baylor, the impact of that game hurt us, and in the process we've got to get back to playing assignment football. There was too many mental errors on defense. Most of it not necessarily had to do with a guy not knowing what to do, but a guy trying to do too much. And we need to kind of regain some swagger on defense. Playing against a team this week that I think is a very, very well-coached football team. I think they had their mulligan last week in the sense that they'd obviously came off a big win against Wyoming. That was obviously a huge win for that program at their place, and probably didn't play as well against Lafayette as what they would have liked, and they kind of showed up on the video. So I think we'll see a very inspired team this week, and we have been preaching since day one about being 1-0, and that's kind of what our focal point needs to be, rather than on who we're playing. We need to be focused on how we're playing, and not looking forward and not looking behind, but focusing on this moment, because I think we've been looking back a little bit, and I think it's hurt us, and we need to focus on looking forward to one game at a time. Questions?
It seemed like Thursday night, it's just a personal assessment, just seemed to be getting beat in the trenches. They were just certainly a lot more physical the other night, and maybe so offensive line to defense. Does that disappoint you some? Because I know you've always taken pride in how physical.
Well, I think there's going to be certain teams that have geared themselves towards being a very, very physical group. I think Western Kentucky is a very physical football team. They have been over quite some period of time. I don't know that if you look back on any of the games that we've played against them that basically we were physically superior in terms of owning the line of scrimmage. I think that most of the games that we've played against them over the last several years have been more finesse-oriented, and I think you're kind of choosing your moments. Now, I think that in terms of – I think physicality can be judged two different ways. We always want to take great pride in throwing our hats around, but in getting to the point to where all of a sudden on the line of scrimmage where we're moving people, it hasn't been us in the past in relation to a little bit of youth. And we've recruited from an offensive standpoint in terms of the guys that can move their feet and pass protect, but also get involved in our pull schemes in the run game and some of those other kinds of things. Defensively, we've looked for more quickness and athleticism than we have in overall size. And so from a matchup standpoint against Western Kentucky, who has recruited to really be just the opposite, they want to play a very, very physical run game. Was what Willie was doing. That's obviously what Bobby's doing now. And, so that I'm not necessarily surprised in terms of the way that the game was played. We're not quite as finesse-oriented, obviously, on offense right now because of some of the limitations that we have. And but that's obviously got to change, and that's kind of part of what we're talking about in relation to transitioning.
What are some of the things that Braley did that he can build on to get even better going into this game that you like?
Well, I thought I was really pleased that Braley didn't force the ball. I think that one of the things about getting your first start, as he did, sometimes you try too hard to make plays and too hard to try to impress. And I think there were several. I thought he threw some good balls. I think that he was taking care of the football, even though he made some plays that were off-balance throws and some of those kind of things. He recognized the coverage that we were getting, and it was worth the risk in relation to being able to put a ball in a position. I think that really the only desperation snap was right there at the end of the game when he threw the interception. And but I was pleased with how well he threw a lot of balls away in that game because he wasn't exactly sure that he could make the throw. And good for him. That's what he needs to do at this point in time. Now, again, I think his arm strength is improving because, he's feeling better. And so I think that, we can start putting a few more balls in there. But I was really pleased with that. And I was really pleased with how emotionally he handled the game because I think that's the other thing kind of going into those situations is, is a guy emotionally prepared to handle the ups and downs of a ball game. And I thought he did a nice job of that.
Difficult for every team, but how much do you think that your team, the defense, kind of feeds off what the offense is doing and vice versa? And how much is that maybe affecting the production on both sides of the ball whenever if the offense doesn't make a converted fourth down there earlier, things like that?
Well, I think that I think every team feeds off of both sides in the sense that I think that, there's always a separate entity that's a little bit involved with being on the offensive side or the defensive side. We played the game to be more of a field position game. And that's probably where we lost, right? If you look at the average starting field positions, there was 16, 17-yard difference. And they have to kind of coordinate a little bit. I think our defense is obviously impacted by, our risk aversion on offense is a little different than what it once was. And defensively, they're used to maybe things being a little faster pace, a little bit more up and down. And so consequently, our defense is not used to maybe being a little bit more conservative. Again, playing the field position, knowing that the offense is not at full throttle, and so I think that there's certainly some impact. But I don't know that that's as significant as maybe some of the other things that I've mentioned, previously.
That's kind of the reason I asked because you said a lot of guys are kind of trying to force the play or not playing their assignment, maybe running up and trying to make
Sure.
and then what they're supposed to be doing frees up. Do you just? I asked that if you chalk it up to just trying to make a play to get the offense back on the field to do something, or is panic set in, or is it just that lack of confidence in Baylor?
I don't know if panic set in. I think that you emotionally after Baylor, which we talked about pretty much at length. You get a score like that, and sometimes that can be very embarrassing. You start questioning yourself. You start kind of wondering about the confidence of people around you, rather than trusting that prior to that we were, even against Oklahoma and Wake and all that, we were playing pretty good defense. And it's that emotional side of things is disconcerting. Obviously, I tried to express after the game to you and to the team about understanding that I think Baylor is very good on offense. I think that's proving to be very true. As I mentioned, I think Oklahoma was very good on defense, and I told the offense not to get down, and I think that's proving to be pretty accurate also. But unfortunately, those emotional ties to that can create some, a lack of confidence, a frustration, and I think that showed up from a defensive perspective in terms of our assignments, and I think especially in the secondary, where play action, guys wanting to go up and make a play on the run really, really hurt us. I mean, the play actions that really create some issues for us, and we need to do our job and let other people do theirs instead of trying to make every play. And this has been a little bit of a problem. It was a little bit of a problem last year towards the end of the season, where we started kind of doing some of this on defense. And we've got to get back to playing great assignment football. And offensively, obviously, while we moved the ball well in the first half in particular, we've got to get back to scoring some points. And, some of that is due to transition and trying to kind of become a little bit where some of the other players on our football team are becoming a little bit more the focal points. And some of it is just about, again, the emotional side of that also in relation to, we're not used to playing necessarily that type of slower game. And that can, it's frustrating for everybody. But I think we are doing what we need to do at this moment as we continue to try to, kind of find ourselves in relation to the quarterback situation and some others.
Assess for us what you think about Texas State defensively.
I think Texas State is playing very good on defense. They obviously didn't play as well this past week, and again, I think that some of that can be probably attributed a little bit to how well they played against Wyoming. And again, there's when you're dealing with 18 to 22-year-old guys, sometimes while you want to turn away all those peripheral entities that are out there that are speaking to you, the reality of it is I'm sure they came back after the Wyoming game and they're feeling really good about kind of where they were at and didn't play quite as well against Lafayette as what they would have liked to have. This is a team that's going to show you multiple looks on defense. It's a team that prides itself, I think, in terms of running around and being physical, and they've done a very, very nice job of that and through the whole course of the season. And so, offensively, we've got to be focused on all the multiple things that they do schematically, and especially I think some of their blitz pressures, but still play a real physical game. And I think in context, I think what you're looking at is sometimes when you're seeing a lot of different things, you do too much thinking and not enough playing. And that's the advantage to being multiple. Because it takes away a little bit of your aggressiveness because you're not exactly sure what you're seeing. And so we've got to do a good job this week in terms of balancing those two in relation to playing physical, but also doing a great job from an assignment standpoint. And because physical just doesn't get it, because then you're on the wrong people, if you're not seeing what's actually out there. So we got to do a good job at balancing that out.
Plus, you're being a quarterback kind of like you do. I think you got his first start a couple of weeks ago.
Right.
Wyoming seemed to be young up front offensive line, but seemed to be a ground-oriented football team. Let's see.
Yeah, very much so. I think that as a lot of teams have turned towards a little bit of the Nevada offense, the pistol offense that was created here several years ago. They have gone to that type of attack. Coach Fran and I go way, way back. And, he's got a very extensive option background back when he was a spread option guy and then continued all that with his zone read option things. This is a pistol option attack, very similar to some of the things that Oklahoma did against us, some of the things that Wake Forest was doing. They didn't do a whole lot against us, but what they were doing prior to that. And so we're facing a quarterback that I think is a very athletic young man. He's got a very live ball in the sense that he can throw the football. But you can tell he enjoys running with it. He enjoys pulling the ball off the read and taking off. And so we've got to play very disciplined from a defense perspective because this is a base option attack, probably more so than anything else. But they do have the ability to be able to get back into more of a spread type of mentality, a spread theme.
I'm sure you've been there. It's not a very big stadium, but it seems like they've kind of ignited that community a little bit. I saw where they had over 20-something thousand again at the stands the other day. So Coach Fran's obviously bringing some enthusiasm to that program.
Well, I think that
they rehired him.
Yeah, I think that's why they rehired him. But I think that I think everyone around the country has always looked at that job as a job that had, David Bailiff won there. Fran is obviously had won there in the past, and now is on his second tour. But you look at that campus, that recruiting location, the money that they have in that program, and I think everyone's kind of looked at that program going, wow, this could be something really, really special. You look at the campus size in terms of the number of students that they have, and it's not a commuter campus. And most of those students live on campus. I know that they've had several very, very high rankings in relation to whichever way you want to kind of go with this, student satisfaction. And, so it's a campus that you can recruit to. And so I think that obviously they were a great addition to our conference for a lot of different reasons, not just from a footprint standpoint, but also from a standpoint of that. I think the program, and especially under Fran's leadership, is really, really going to blossom. And I think that they're feeling that right now because they have everything that they need to move the thing forward.
A couple of weeks ago, you said you guys didn't practice very well prior to Tulane. I thought you had as a whole different canoe last week. And you've only had a couple chances to glance at them this week. If that's a barometer, how do you see your team, at least in between the years right now?
I think are we where we were at in preseason camp? No. Are we moving back that direction? Yes. I've been very pleased with our practice mentality, our attitude, or the way that we're approaching things again. I was, as mentioned, disappointed after Baylor prior to Tulane, whether it be looking at Tulane knowing that they're not Baylor, or it was the opposite in terms of just again conversations in the around campus in relation to the loss against Baylor. And but I think the day off was a good thing for us. I mean, play 6 games as quickly as we played 6 games. That was, I think, wearing on us a little bit, and I think the day off was probably very, very beneficial. We gave the players Saturday off, and I think that was probably good for them to kind of get away.
You mentioned a couple games ago that you thought that the team was looking back to last season a little bit more than we would have liked, but then again, you also had injuries this season. So having said all that, what do you think you guys need to do moving forward to get your confidence back? Because, I mean, after losing 2 games, obviously
right,
it's a low point. So can that be a positive to say, okay, we're not looking back to last season, but we've lost 3 games and we can only go up from here?
Well, I don't think there's any question that last season is not in really anybody's mind right now. Getting things fixed, I think, is in everybody's mind, and that can lead to guys in a great framework in terms of their mindset. It can also lead to poor performance too, and that's always going to be judged out on the field. I think that the only thing that I've ever kind of found that helps your confidence is to practice hard to where you have confidence in each other and then win. I don't think there's any other magic dust out there. And again, I've been pleased with our work ethic. I think that there was obviously, which is understandable. Again, not trying to. These are things that obviously as coaches that you kind of deal with. I think everybody was a little bit anxious, as I'm sure you were and our fans were, in relation to, okay, now what is Braley going to do? How big is the loss of Colton? I think that probably I know as coaches we already had a high confidence level. I think our team did, but the reality of it is there's still a game that has to be played, and you're still curious as how he's going to handle those things, as I mentioned earlier. And I think that probably our whole football team feels better now than what we did probably going into the Western Kentucky with the short week, and again, maybe not a completely healthy quarterback. That we've got a very productive quarterback that can operate and will continue to get better as he gets more game time and gets healthier.
Coach, you talked about this team running a pistol option, and then you prepared for the triple option against Wake Forest, and they threw the ball around a little bit more. I know that Tyler Jones only had 2 starts, he only had 66 passing yards, his pass was against Lafayette, but from what you've seen on film, I mean, can he sling it around if they want to change up the game plan and get the off guard?
He can definitely throw the football, and they definitely have the capabilities based off of past history, along with they still have the athletes that are available out there to be able to throw the ball. And that's going to be a great shot tonight on the news, by the way, Gene. Yeah, and so I think that he's definitely a guy that in that style of offense becomes more of a focal point, and I'm sure that they, with his age, are winging him into some things, but they've got to feel very good about kind of the direction they're headed with him, and that there's more opportunities probably to expose him to some different things on the field because he's shown that he's prepared to handle it.
I know you said you have to score more points, but I didn't realize this until looking at the stats, and I know that a lot of times these stats can be skewed because you haven't played all the conference games, but it has to be encouraging to know that Giants is in the top 10 in average rushing yards. Colton was in the top 10, but even Braley's up there now with his average of passing yards per game. It is encouraging to know that you do have playmakers. It's just a matter of putting it all together.
Well, obviously, yeah, there's a function in terms of exposure. And I think that, as I've said before, from an offensive perspective, that is probably the biggest question right now. If you look back, the third-team quarterback transferred out, right, because of the family situation and probably searching for a little bit more playing time in relation to kind of where things were. The fourth-team quarterback all of a sudden has back surgery. What was a position of depth in the spring all of a sudden is not. And Colton gets injured in the first ball game. How much more exposure do you want for that? Braley misses 3 weeks of practice in throwing the football. And so now, again, our offense is not changed necessarily because of Braley. The offense has changed because of the lack of depth at the quarterback position right now, and has to because of again, how many exposures do you want still out there? And so I'm talking about exposures to contact, exposures to hits. How much do you want the quarterback out there dancing around? I think that probably the fan base probably saw a little bit that Braley is very, very similar to Colton. And we're not doing all the things that we did with Colton, not because Braley can't handle it, because we don't want to expose Braley to those things. But there were a lot of things in that ball game where Braley escaped. Braley escaped and threw the ball down the field. Braley stood in there and took a hit. He's very, very similar to Colton, and he knows what he's doing. I mean, there's no question that our offense, from a functionality standpoint, it's all out there. Now, the problem comes is, again, how much contact you want to expose him to in relation to now you've got a young man that I think is going to be tremendously talented but doesn't have any game experience in Brian Williams. And so the quarterback depth is impacted as certainly more than I think the quarterback. Right, and that's what's changed us offensively throughout the course of the season from the moment that Colton got hurt.
You talked last week about how big a rushing game is to come along, and Jairus had shown sparks of what Jairus can do, and then for Centarius to go out there last week. I know we touched on this in post game, but were you surprised at how dominant his running was, especially on that 22-yard gain or something? It didn't look anything like a guy who just went through 2 torn ACLs in the last 2 years. No,
as I've said, Centarius has got a tremendous work ethic, and in terms of rehab, only people that I think have gone through, which most athletes have gone through at some point in time, at least in this game, an injury that is a difficult injury. One that the rehab is hard. It is frustrating. It is. It's not just the physical torture; it's the mental torture that you kind of go through in trying to rehab something. And guys that don't have great work ethics very rarely recover. But Centarius has got a great work ethic. I'd seen him out there in practice, obviously not in live contact stuff, but he's been around the offense for quite some time. He knows the blocking schemes. He's always had great vision and some of those other kinds of things. And so I'm not surprised. And obviously, the impact of having Jairus and Centarius both back and healthy, that allows for some things that eases some of the transitions. And from being much more where it was very much a quarterback-driven offense, partly because of the quarterback and partly because of the 2 running backs not being healthy. And ultimately you search for balance, but ultimately you're going to make sure that the guys that can impact the game have an opportunity to impact the game to the best of their abilities in conjunction with how everybody else can operate. If you're if your offensive line can't run block, then you've got to find other ways to get running backs the ball, which we've done at times based off of kind of the matchup along with health in the offensive line.
Coach, I know you take it one at a time, but I'm sure you've talked to him too about, hey, we've got a lot of football left.
I have. I've mentioned that. I very rarely do that. I even mentioned it this last week in terms of saying I very rarely touch on this. But I think with some of that focal point in terms of trying to regain a little bit of the confidence and a little bit of swagger, that maybe that's a bad term because I think swagger kind of connotes arrogance to some degree. But we need to kind of get back to playing our football and focusing on ourselves in terms of that rather than worried about what other people are saying or what other people are doing. And there's still a lot of football left. And as I mentioned to the team, there's multiple opportunities down the road for us to right this ship. It's not like this is the last ball game of the season. But we have to play better than what we're playing right now in order to accomplish that. And there is there is enough athleticism and there's enough opportunities for us to do that.
Any other questions for Coach Berry?
Wow, we got a stand-in.
Alex wore himself out.
Very good. Thank y'all.
Thanks.
First up, junior linebacker Ray Stovall. Floor's open.
Hey, Ray, I know when we interviewed you after the game the other night, you guys were mad on that defensive side of the football, obviously, with the effort. And obviously, I'm sure you guys have had a little come-to-Jesus meeting this week, but I know you got to get better, too, and soon.
Yeah, it's the biggest thing these past couple games just been the mental mistakes. Man coverage, you leave somebody open, get out of the wrong gap. I mean, everybody's been guilty of it. I mean, because you see people put points up on us. It's not just one or two people. It's the whole defense. So as a unit, we just have to cut down on that. And I think we're doing that this week. We've already, been a lot better this week.
Coach made a comment about the Baylor game, and for lack of a better expression, was kind of a bad drunk and kind of getting over that hangover of that game a little bit. Y'all kind of wobbled out of that thing a little bit, and do you think it set you back as much as maybe he said it did?
Yes, hearing Coach Berry talk about that, I realized more that it had an effect, not knowing that it did. But I'd say, most of the team was over that by the next week because, one game at a time, that's what we were trying to win. But we're completely over that now.
Do you feel like y'all are trying to do too much because y'all feed off of the offense and then vice versa, the offense feeds off the defense? So, if they drive down, don't put points before just immediately. Because Coach Berry was saying y'all aren't really playing assignment football, it's like y'all trying to do too much. Why do you think that is?
It goes back to the statement that coaches, no matter what level, they say, big-time players make big-time plays. So people, they want to make that play. Like if the offense is struggling, we got to do something. We got to get a stop or do something. So somebody is going to usually take a chance on a play. It's just you're either a hero or a zero in those circumstances. So we just have to if you're going to play man coverage, then just play your man. If you have zone, if you have a gap, just get in your gap. And don't worry about that because the plays will come to you.
The Bobcats like to run that double tight a lot. Obviously, they've been running the ball pretty hard this season. So you would think you guys are going to kind of box that thing a little bit tighter. But how much tape you have had a chance to look at this week on them and give us your thoughts on it?
I've watched a few hours of them already, and I think that they're a good football team. I know that they switched quarterbacks, and they're going with a younger guy now. Is he a redshirt freshman? True freshman? He's an athlete now. He can run around, and he can throw it a little bit. The big thing, it's hard, like watching somebody on their first or second start is you really don't get an accurate depiction of them sometimes just because they're still working out those game jitters. But I believe that he's a really good football player. They have a stable of running backs, and the offensive line is pretty big, so I think they're a pretty good team.
Right. It seems pretty frequent that you're able to be heard over a lot of people on defense. You seem like that guy that's kind of rallied the troops, so to speak. What is the conversation like in the locker room? What are some things that you try to say to, as Coach Berry says, right this ship with all these opportunities that you have left?
Just like what I've been saying, just play your ball. Do what you're coached to do and do your assignment, and everything else will just fall into place. I think that everybody on defense, we're motivated to win. That's not ever an issue. That's not anything we ever have to preach, but the main thing is just do your job. You don't have to worry about the person next to you, because you just need to know that he's going to do his job, and you need to do your job so he can, feel the same way.
Every game I know you guys want to win, but how important, having lost 3 straight, is getting a W? How paramount is it this week?
It's a must, really. It's a conference. Well, we're into all of our conference games now, and it's pretty important. This is the next game to win, so we wouldn't like to lose anymore at all.
In terms of your overall defense, you mentioned, like you said, you guys want to be able to make a play, and everyone should do their job and not try to do too much. But in the gist of the game, sometimes you have to make adjustments. So how do you feel your defense is doing in terms of making those mid-game adjustments to what teams are doing? I
think that Coach Reffett had made a point to us that if you go by scoring during the game by quarter, our first quarter scoring is low, and then second quarter their offense might come out with something. They'll get a couple points, but we adjust and we make some stops in the end of the second quarter, and then third quarter they adjust again. But our fourth quarter stats have been the lowest, I think, in a while. We've had before last game we had 9 points scored, I think, the entire season in the fourth quarter. So we come out and make adjustments. It's just we just have to eliminate the big plays that happen in the second and the third quarter coming out at halftime.
And then what do you think of your offense overall, since you're seeing it in practice? What do you think of with all they've had to go through this season with all the injuries? What do you think they're doing well right now? What do you like about your offense?
I'm really proud of our offense, because there's a lot of stuff. Injuries happen, they're going to happen, but some you just don't want them to happen to certain people like Colton. But I think that Braley's came in. He's brought a lot of swagger to the offense. You see him talking back and forth with the defense sometimes, the opposing defense. And as a defense, we like to see that. And I think he came out and he played a really great game last week. But as a defense, we just have to do better, and we have to help the offense more, because they're going to get it done.
Good luck, man.
Thank you.
Y'all take it easy.
Next up, junior running back Centarius Donald. Floor is open for questions.
Well, Centarius, you got in a couple of times and did a couple of running, but you never actually got to hold the ball. This past week, you looked so pumped every time you did get the ball, especially on that long run. Just how do you fit into words just how it felt to be back out there?
It felt great to knock the little rust off that I had. I've been out for almost a year and a half or so, and it just felt good to be back out there playing my team, to help them try to get a win. Unfortunately, we didn't get it, so, it just, motivates me a lot, and my work ethic, to get back out there and try to help, just to be a team all over again.
Do you find yourself flinching at all? I know you did a little bit last year, but at this point, are you a lot more confident and not trying to be jittery or maybe running a little gingerly because you don't want anything to happen?
I feel very confident now, more confident than last year. I try to stick to the basics, not trying to do too much, as of right now, as a start. But as we go on down the road, I feel even more confident than I am now. So it's just really, the mind thing.
I know Coach was disappointed, I guess, in the offensive line effort a couple of weeks ago, but the other night I thought they did a nice job of getting off the football and opening up some holes. They seem to have made some nice adjustments in that second quarter, but you guys are going to have to find a way to move the football on the ground for 4 quarters.
Yeah, well, you know, we've been at practice, you know, getting with the line, you know, trying to get them to make big plays, you know, move their feet, blow them off the ball. You know, it's just the second half we kind of came out slow. You know, the first half it was a good start, but it would have been better if we would have came out the second half with the same mentality, you know. So we're just practicing hard, you know, getting them out the ball, giving the scout defense the look to, you know, proceed for the game, you know. So it just really, you know, a work at practice to get it go towards the game.
What do you think just that having more of a running game as you guys continue to have has done for the offense, considering it's in transition right now? You guys are really trying to develop a new identity and see what you can do and you can't do.
Well, as far as the run game, you know, it's, you know, a lot of athletic backs in the backfield with me and Jairus, you know. Unfortunately, we having some difficulties at quarterback, even though Brady has stepped up. But as far as the run game, I think we're a couple games behind due to the loss. You know, we got to get the run game going back. You know, me being back healthy, I think will be a lot of help. Jairus being healthy will be a lot of help. You know, some of the younger guys in the backfield starting to step up, so it's good. It's been a good transition.
Give us your take on what you see out of these guys defensively. I know they one of the top categories in the country in red zone defense, but obviously they play pretty physical up front too.
Yeah, they play pretty physical up front. You know, we just have to, like I said, you know, jump up on these guys. You know, like Coach Berry always says, the first 4 minutes determines the game. You know, and I feel like, you know, our offensive line, you know, come out and jump on them. I think they'll, you know, lay down. You know, but it's all up to us if we want to win or not.
What do you think of just the trip to Texas State in general, just a big campus and enthusiastic bunch of students, just, you know, the challenges of playing in that environment?
Well, you know, we played in bigger stadiums, you know, and it's like, you know, fans are always trying to talk us out of our game, but that's everywhere. You know, it's going to be like that, the environment. You know, we used to it, you know, so it's really not, you know, anything big.
You talked about capitalizing on the first 4 minutes. I thought maybe a turning point the other night was the defensive great stand before the half. You guys got the ball to open the third and couldn't get things going. So once again, it was the first 4 minutes of the half that determined the game. Talk about that and obviously having to correct that down the rest of the way.
Well, you know, the first 4 minutes of the game, you know, they had the ball for the longer, you know, and they ran the clock out, you know. We really didn't get a chance to, you know, do what we were supposed to do, all because of ball situations. But, you know, when we did get out there the first half, we came off good, had a 3-and-out, came back, you know, made some big plays, but not enough. And they were making the big plays the first 4 minutes of the game. But at halftime, you know, we you know, talked about a lot of things to motivate us to go back out there and start it out good, you know. And clearly, you know, we had a little downfall.
Y'all embrace being 1-0 each week, but are y'all putting extra emphasis on this week about getting the second half of the season started off right and maybe running the table the rest of the way in the conference to give yourselves the chance of that ultimate goal?
Yeah, well, we really put, you know, extra emphasis in, you know, the first and second half regardless, you know, because we want to be the team, you know, that starts it and finish it, not just be the one started and not finish it, or not start it and then finish it. So that's just, you know, every day at practice, we start it, we got to finish it. You know, you know, the first knockout punch, you know, it's very critical to us, so that's what we're going for.
Any other questions for Centarius?